It seems like everywhere you go, you hear that to get good at jazz improvisation, you have to master the 2-5-1 progression. To be honest, when I started out with jazz, I heard the same thing, but I didn't really believe that one chord progression could be so important. Now, more than 10 years and thousands of hours of practicing later, I have to admit that I was wrong. 2-5-1 progressions are really the backbone of countless jazz standards, and you could say even the backbone of jazz improvisation. If you want to get good at jazz, 2-5-1 progressions are the way to go. That's why in this video I'm going to show you how to master 2-5-1 progressions. But let's quickly make sure that we all know what 2-5-1 progressions are actually. Let's take, for example, a C major scale. On each degree of the scale, we can build a chord. And since many years, composers use these chords. And what turned out to be the most used chord progression is connecting the chords on the 4th, 5th, and 1st scale degree. This is also called the classical cadence, and I'm sure you've heard this sound many times before. In jazz, we basically have the same thing, but instead of the chord on the 4th degree, we use the chord on the 2nd degree. And then, of course, we add a 4th note to all the chords. This is called the 2-5-1 chord progression, and we did this now here in C major, but of course you can do this in any other key the same way. But why is this 2-5-1 progression really so important? So similar to the 4-5-1 progression that you can find in countless classical pieces from many famous composers, and of course also pop songs and so on, you will find the 2-5-1 progression in countless jazz songs. In fact, it's not easy to even find jazz standards that don't have a 2-5-1 progression in them. So by learning the 2-5-1 progression in the most important keys for your instrument, you will be very well prepared to tackle a lot of different jazz standards. The most important question is, of course, how do we practice this? Since we saw with C major as an example that the chords can all be constructed from the same scale, we could just use one scale, so the C major scale for the 2-5-1 in C major, and just start improvising over it, right? Well, you might have tried to do that, but you might have also seen that it's not quite that easy. The key to sounding good over any chord progression is to place the notes of the scale so they fall on the right places and represent the chords that they are played over. That's why the first step should always be to just practice improvising with the chord tones. So for each chord we take the 4 chord tones, the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 7th chord tone, and then we start out by playing first 1, 3, 5, 7 for each chord. As soon as this works, you can start by mixing up the order. So for example, you could play 3, 1, 5, 7. Changing the order of chord tones like this will really train your ear to hear the chord movement and will give you already countless ideas for soloing. Of course, eventually you will also want to expand into different octaves and not only stay within the range of the 1 to the 7. A great way to prepare for that would be, as a second step, to practice the chord tones from the bottom of your instrument up to the top and back. So now that we have the chord tones down, it's time to add some chromatic notes. And a really good way to do that is to use approaches. There are many different kinds of approaches, but I'm going to focus here on one-note approaches, which means that each chord tone you can approach from below by a half step or from above diatonically, so with the next note in the scale. So let's focus for now on the chromatic approaches from below. Let's take the D minor 7 chord. We can approach D with C sharp, F with E, A with G sharp and C with B. The same we do with the other two chords, and a great way to practice this is to play the chord tones down, so 7, 5, 3, 1, and approach each tone chromatically from below. The other way, as I mentioned before, is diatonic approaches from above. So what we do is we always take the next note of the scale and approach with this note a chord tone. For D minor 7, it would be that we approach D with E, F with G, A with B, and C with D. So this we again do with the other chords as well, and then to practice this, it's great to play 1, 3, 5, 7 and approach each chord diatonically from above. Let me give you an example of how a line could sound like that utilizes these approach notes and chord tones. So what we see here is that we approach D with E in the first bar, and then we use chord tones. In the second bar, we start with a chord tone, B, and then we approach G with F sharp, and the rest is again chord tones. And then in the last two bars, we use first chord tones, and in the last bar, we approach C with D. Now we are finally ready to improvise with the scale notes. And when we practice this, we want to make sure that we practice the scale in a way that it represents the chord. One way of doing this is by always starting with a root and then going up to the 7. So over D minor, we would start with D and go up to C. On G7, we start with G going up to F, and on C major, we start on C going up to B. Of course, we can also practice this the other way around. So we start on the 7, going to the 1. If you want to take this one step further, you can also start on the 3rd and go to the 9th of each chord. And of course, you can also do this the other way around. After you've practiced chord tones, approaches, and scales, you're already really well equipped to improvise over 2-5-1 progressions, and with that over a lot of standards. As a finish of this video, let's look at 2 phrases that utilize all of this and bring it together. So this phrase starts with a few scale notes, and then there's a chromatic approach to D, again a scale note, then going to the 3rd of G7, approaching B by A sharp, and then approaching G by A. Then again a few chord tones, going to C major, and in C major the phrase ends pretty much only using chord tones. The second example starts with mostly using chord tones and some approaches. Then over G7 we also use mostly chord tones and one approach to E over C major, and finishing again with chord tones. Okay guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like and subscribe for more videos like this. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about approach notes now, make sure to check out this video next. See you next time.